There's a strange moment that happens when you realize you've become optional in the lives of the people you raised. It doesn't arrive with cruelty. It doesn't come with insults. It arrives with absence. I remember the exact morning it hit me. I was sitting at the small dining table by the window, sorting through mail I didn't care about, when I noticed how quiet the house had been lately. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet, the kind that echoes. I checked my phone out of habit. No missed calls, no unread messages. I scrolled back through my call log, then further still. That's when my stomach dropped. 78 days. That's how long it had been since any of my children had reached out to me. No arguments had happened. No dramatic falling out, just nothing, like I had slowly faded out of their schedules. My name is Carol. I'm 68 years old, retired, and widowed. And at that moment, sitting alone in the house my late husband and I worked our entire lives to keep, I realized something deeply unsettling. My children didn't miss me. They missed what I provided. 4 years earlier, my husband, Frank, passed away unexpectedly. He was practical to a fault, insurance policies labeled, finances documented, everything prepared just in case. When he died, he left me secure. A paid-off home, savings, and enough monthly income to live comfortably if I was careful. We had always taught our 3 children independence, or at least we thought we had. After the funeral, they hovered. They checked in constantly, offered to help with paperwork, suggested ways to simplify my finances. I was grateful. Vulnerable people often are. Then life started happening to them. A business that needed one last push. A tuition payment that couldn't wait. A medical bill that insurance somehow didn't cover. Each request came wrapped in reassurance. This is temporary. We'll pay you back. You don't even notice the difference. So I helped. Again and again. What I didn't see at first was the shift. The conversations shortened. The warmth cooled. Calls became transactional. They didn't ask how I was feeling. They asked what I could do. Eventually, they stopped asking altogether. They told. Money amounts sent through text. Deadlines included. Gratitude optional. I began feeling uneasy whenever my phone buzzed. Not because I was busy, but because I knew exactly what the message would be before I opened it. One night, unable to sleep, I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statements. I started adding everything together. Transfers. Checks. Short-term loans. My hands began to shake. The total was more than I ever imagined. And in that moment, a terrifying thought surfaced. If this continues, what happens to me? I didn't sleep that night. The numbers kept replaying in my mind like a warning I couldn't turn off. Every transfer, every check, every just this once that had quietly stacked itself into something enormous. By morning, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I called Michael, the financial advisor my husband and I had worked with for years. He had known Frank well. He knew how carefully we had planned for retirement, how intentional every decision had been. When I asked for an appointment, his voice softened immediately. "Of course," he said. "Come in today." I brought everything. Bank statements, notes, old emails. I laid them out across his desk, apologizing the entire time, as if I were wasting his patience instead of protecting my future. Michael didn't interrupt. He didn't scold me. He just listened. Then he turned the monitor toward me and showed me projections. "If nothing changes," he said gently, "you'll exhaust your savings in about 6 years." 6 years. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. At 74, I would be financially exposed. No cushion, no flexibility, no dignity. "What if I stop helping them?" I asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. "Then you'll be fine," he said. "More than fine. But you have to stop now." The word stop felt heavy, final, almost cruel. "They're my children," I said, more to myself than to him. "They're adults," he replied calmly. "And adults are responsible for their own emergencies." I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The guilt arrived before I even parked. Voices filled my head, what they would say, how they would react, the disappointment, the accusations. For days, I practiced conversations out loud. In the mirror, in the car, in bed at night. Every version sounded wrong, too harsh, too apologetic, too weak. Eventually, fear outweighed guilt. I invited them all to dinner. I cooked carefully, choosing familiar dishes, setting the table the way I used to when Frank was alive. I wanted warmth, normalcy. I wanted to believe love would soften the truth. Only one child arrived on time. Another came late, distracted. The third didn't come at all. He asked to be included by phone instead. That should have told me everything. Halfway through dinner, my rehearsed words vanished. My hands trembled. "I can't keep giving you money," I said quietly. "I've looked at the numbers. I need to protect my future." The room changed instantly. My daughter frowned. My son leaned back, arms crossed. "You're overthinking this," one of them said. "You're fine," another added. "You live alone in a valuable house. You'll be okay." When I explained the projections, they waved them away. "You're being selfish," my daughter finally said. That word landed harder than any shout ever could. They left without hugs, without goodbyes. I sat alone at the table, staring at untouched plates, realizing I hadn't just set a boundary. I had crossed a line they never expected me to. At first, I told myself the distance was temporary. Families argue, feelings get bruised, time smooths things out. That's what I repeated to myself as I washed the dishes from that night, carefully drying plates no one had finished eating. For the first few days, I waited. I didn't call. I didn't text. I told myself I was giving them space, the kind they had asked for without actually saying it. A week passed. Then two. When I finally reached out, the responses were polite but hollow. "Busy right now? Can't talk. We'll catch up later." Their voices sounded far away, as if I were interrupting something more important. Then the invitations stopped. I wasn't told about my grandson's school play. I found out through a photo posted online. I stared at that picture for a long time, his small face on stage, searching the crowd for people who weren't there. I sent a message congratulating him. It was read. It was never answered. The first real fracture came with his birthday. For years, I had been part of every celebration. I baked cakes, wrapped gifts, stayed late to clean up. That year, no invitation arrived. I didn't ask why. I already knew. I sent a gift anyway, carefully chosen. Something he had mentioned months earlier. It was delivered, signed for, opened, no thank you, no message, nothing. I felt something shift inside me then, not anger, not grief, but understanding. Thanksgiving came next. For over 4 decades, the holiday had lived in my house. The same recipes, the same table, the same stories retold every year. When no one mentioned plans, I finally called my daughter. "Oh," she said casually, "we're doing it at your brother's this year." There was a pause before I asked the question that felt suddenly dangerous. "Am I invited?" Another pause, longer this time. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said carefully. "Things are still sensitive." Sensitive. That was the word they used to explain my absence. I spent Thanksgiving alone for the first time in my life. I ate leftovers and watched old movies, trying not to imagine the empty chair they hadn't even noticed was missing. Christmas was worse. I mailed gifts to the grandchildren, wrapped with care. I even included modest checks for my children, not because they deserved them, but because some part of me still hoped generosity could fix what honesty had broken. The checks were deposited within days. The silence remained. That's when the truth finally settled in. They weren't upset because I had hurt them. They were upset because I had stopped supplying them. Once the money slowed, so did the relationship. I stopped sleeping, lost weight, avoided friends so I wouldn't have to explain why my holidays were suddenly empty. The house began to feel like a place I was merely occupying, full of memories that no longer belonged to me. I kept thinking it couldn't get worse. I was wrong. The day everything finally broke open didn't feel important when it began. It was an ordinary afternoon, the kind that blurs into every other day when you live alone. I had gone to the grocery store, moving slowly through the aisles, lost in thought, deciding whether I truly needed fresh bread or just wanted something warm in the house. That's when I heard a laugh. It was familiar, too familiar. I turned my head slightly and saw my daughter-in-law standing a few feet away, phone pressed to her ear, one hand resting casually on her cart. For a brief moment, relief washed over me. A connection, a link back to my family. I almost said her name. Something stopped me. Her voice carried clearly in the quiet aisle. "I know," she said, laughing again. "She actually thought we'd keep coming around after she cut us off." My body went still. I stood frozen beside the shelf, heart pounding, every sense suddenly sharpened. "She's just being dramatic," she continued. "We're waiting it out. She's old. Eventually the house will be ours anyway." The words didn't sound cruel in her mouth. That's what made them worse. They were casual, practical, like discussing a delayed delivery. They weren't missing me. They were waiting for me, waiting for time to do the work they didn't want to. I don't remember putting my basket down. I don't remember walking out. I only remember sitting in my car afterward, hands resting in my lap, staring straight ahead as the world moved around me. For the first time in months, I didn't cry. The grief that had been pressing on my chest evaporated, replaced by something colder. Clearer, understanding, every unanswered message, every hollow excuse, every check cashed without acknowledgement suddenly made sense. I wasn't their mother anymore. I was a delay. I drove home and sat in my living room, surrounded by framed photographs of moments that now felt staged. Birthdays, holidays, smiles that had come with conditions I hadn't recognized at the time. They were already dividing the house in their minds. Planning rooms, imagining futures that began after I was gone. That's when the decision formed, not with anger, not with spite, but with certainty. I wasn't going to wait quietly for my life to end just so someone else could benefit. I picked up my phone and called my financial advisor. "I want to sell the house," I said. There was a pause on the other end. And, I added, "my children can't know until it's done." He asked if I was sure. I didn't hesitate. "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied, because in that grocery store aisle, I finally understood something powerful. If they were waiting for my disappearance, I would give them something else instead. My choice. Once the decision was made, everything changed. The anxiety that had lived in my chest for months didn't slowly fade, it vanished. In its place came a strange calm, the kind that settles in after a storm has already passed. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. My financial advisor connected me with a real estate agent he trusted, someone discreet, professional, and not prone to small talk. From the first meeting, I was clear. No signs in the yard, no neighborhood chatter, no contact with my family. She nodded without hesitation. "It happens more often than you'd think," she said. That alone told me I wasn't alone. The house went on the market quietly. Photos were taken while I spent the afternoon with a friend, pretending it was just another visit. When I returned, the rooms looked almost unfamiliar, bright, staged, inviting. Like a version of the house that belonged to someone else already. Offers came quickly, stronger than I expected. I accepted one from a young couple expecting their first child. They walked through the house holding hands, talking softly about paint colors and cribs. I watched them from the doorway and felt something close to relief. The house would be loved again. The closing date was set for 6 weeks later. Those weeks were filled with careful preparation. I researched places I had once dreamed of living, quiet towns, lower costs, slower mornings. Places where no one knew my history or my last name. I chose a small mountain city I had visited decades earlier and never forgot. It felt peaceful, anonymous, mine. I found a modest condo overlooking the hills and bought it outright. No mortgage, no explanations. Packing was the hardest part, but also the most revealing. I worked one room at a time, asking myself a simple question. Does this belong to the life I'm building, or the life I'm leaving? Most things didn't make the cut. I kept a few books, my favorite chair, clothes I actually wore, and one photo album. Just one. The rest, furniture, decorations, boxes of old memories, I donated or left behind, including framed family photos. That surprised even me. But I realized something as I took them down. Memories don't disappear just because the frames do. And some memories didn't deserve the wall space anymore. As the closing date approached, the house stopped feeling like a home. It became an object, a valuable one but no longer emotional. The morning I signed the paperwork, my hands were steady. The check represented more than money. It represented decades of work, patience, sacrifice, and my right to decide how the rest of my life would look. That afternoon, I drove away without a goodbye tour. No last look in the mirror, no second guessing, just forward. What I didn't know yet was that my children had started to sense something was wrong. The first call came 3 weeks before the sale was finalized. I stared at my phone as it rang, the screen glowing with my daughter's name. It felt surreal, like seeing a ghost. She hadn't called in months, not once. I let it ring, then it rang again. On the third attempt, I answered. Her voice was bright, too bright. "Mom, I've been meaning to call you," she said, as if time had simply slipped away. "How are you doing?" I almost laughed at the performance. Almost. I'm fine, I replied carefully. How are the kids? Oh, they're great, she said quickly, then paused. Listen, I've been thinking. I think we all handled things badly before. Family should come before money, don't you think? There it was. The timing wasn't subtle. It never is when panic sets in. She invited me to dinner that Sunday. Everyone would be there, she said. It was time to reset. To move forward. To put everything behind us. I knew exactly what had happened. Someone had seen the house. A neighbor, a listing photo. A whisper travels faster than truth ever does. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were checking the locks. I'll think about it, I said. On Sunday afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table and watched the clock. At 4:45 p.m., I sent a short message to the family group chat. Not feeling well, need to cancel. Hope you all have a nice evening. Then I turned my phone off. I imagined them checking their watches, calling, growing irritated, waiting. The same way I had waited through empty holidays and unanswered messages. The closing happened 2 weeks later on a quiet Tuesday morning. I signed the final papers without hesitation, accepted the check, walked out lighter than I had in years. That afternoon, I arrived at my new home, a clean, quiet condo with a view of the mountains. Everything I owned fit comfortably inside. Before leaving the old house, I had done one last thing. I left a letter. Not angry, not dramatic. Just honest. I explained why I sold the house, why I was leaving, and why I would no longer be part of their lives. I told them I had heard the conversation. I told them the future they were waiting for no longer existed. I mailed copies to each of their homes, timed to arrive the day after the sale closed. That night my phone exploded. Calls, voicemails, messages layered with disbelief, anger, panic. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I sat on my balcony, watching the sun dip behind the mountains, breathing deeply, freely for the first time in years. But they weren't finished. The envelope was thick. That was the first thing I noticed when I pulled it from my mailbox the morning after my phone went silent again. It wasn't handwritten. It wasn't friendly. The return address belonged to a law office. For a moment, my heart skipped, but not from fear, from recognition. I carried it inside, made myself a cup of tea, and sat at the small table by the window before opening it. Whatever was inside deserved my full attention. The letter was formal, cold, filled with language meant to intimidate. They were accusing me of everything from emotional abandonment to financial misconduct. They claimed I had made implied promises. They demanded restitution. Access. Answers, they wanted the house back. They wanted the money they believed should have been theirs. They wanted me back in my place. I read it twice. Then I laughed, not bitterly, not hysterically, clearly. Because for the first time in this entire ordeal, I understood something they did not. I was prepared. Years ago, long before I realized I would need them, I had kept records. Every transfer, every message, every request framed as urgency, every guilt-laced sentence carefully preserved. Not out of suspicion, but out of habit. My husband had taught me that clarity protects peace. I called a lawyer that afternoon. A sharp, calm woman who listened without interruption as I told my story. When I finished, she nodded once. "This isn't about inheritance," she said. "It's about entitlement." We responded formally, confidently, without emotion. The case dragged on for months, but it never truly moved forward. Every accusation unraveled under documentation. Every claim collapsed under timelines and facts. Eventually, it was dismissed. Quietly. No apology followed. No acknowledgement, just silence. But this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't a punishment. It was a boundary. I filled my days with things that belonged only to me: morning coffee on the balcony, long walks along mountain trails, books I had meant to read for years, music I had forgotten I loved. I painted again, small canvases at first, just for myself. I planted herbs in pots and watched them grow. I made friends who knew nothing about my past and needed nothing from my future. No one asked me for money. No one measured my worth in what I could provide. Months later, a neighbor from my old street sent a message. "They still talk about you," she wrote. "They don't understand." I smiled. They didn't need to. People assume loss is loud, that it comes with tears, dramatic endings, and shattered moments that announce themselves. But the greatest loss of my life happened quietly and so did the greatest gain. When my children disappeared from my days, I thought I had lost everything that mattered. I thought I had failed as a mother. I thought the silence meant I was unlovable. I was wrong. What I lost was expectation. What I lost was obligation disguised as love. What I lost was the belief that sacrifice guarantees loyalty. And what I gained was myself. My days are simple now. I wake with the sun spilling across the mountains, make my coffee slowly, and sit outside long enough to actually taste it. I choose what my time belongs to. Some days it's a long walk. Some days it's a book that keeps me company for hours. Some days it's absolutely nothing, and that feels like freedom. No one asks me for anything anymore. That used to scare me. Now, it comforts me. I've learned that love isn't proven by how much you give until there's nothing left. Real love doesn't require you to shrink so others can feel bigger. And family, real family, doesn't keep score. I used to believe endurance was the same as strength. That being needed meant being valued. That silence was something to fear. But silence, when chosen, is powerful. It gives you space to hear your own thoughts again, to recognize your own worth without someone else confirming it, to rebuild a life based not on obligation, but on intention. I don't know if my children will ever understand my decision. I don't wait for apologies. I don't check my phone hoping for reconciliation. I've made peace with the fact that some people only love you for what you provide, and when you stop, they reveal themselves. And that revelation, painful as it was, saved me. I kept my dignity. I kept my independence. I kept my future. And perhaps most importantly, I kept my self-respect. If you're listening to this and feel invisible, if you've been taught that love must be earned through sacrifice, if you're afraid to draw a line because you think it will leave you alone, let me tell you something I wish I'd learned sooner. Sometimes, choosing yourself doesn't leave you with nothing. Sometimes, it leaves you with everything that actually matters. And if my story stays with you, if it mirrors something in your own life, then maybe this ending isn't really an ending at all. Maybe it's an invitation to stop waiting and start living.